Hello, Anna Navarro.
Hello, Brian.
It is Friday. You seem in a lovely mood.
I'm pretending.
You're
because,
pretending.
Yeah. Listeners and viewers said last week I was mean to you, so I'm
Oh.
going to be sickeningly sweet.
Oh, how about
today.
that? You know what? Well, sincere or not doesn't really matter to me. I'll just take it. I have no problem with this. So we are very close to Election Day. How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling good.
Yeah, you seem relaxed.
No, I'm not relaxed. I'm
Okay.
just tired beyond. I'm just so exhausted. I can't even muster up anxiety because
Right.
I'm really just so incredibly tired and sleep deprived. Look, I've told you before that I was going to feel okay November 6th because I was going to do everything I possibly could.
You really have done everything you possibly
to
can.
try to help Kamala Harris win and Donald Trump lose. But I've been out there in the States. I've been out there in Nevada and Arizona, in Pennsylvania. I'm going to North Carolina and Georgia this weekend. People are really enthusiastic. People are, I think, feeling the optimism. I think they are. I think there are some of these undecided unicorns are finally making up their minds, and I think they are breaking for Kamala Harris. Look, I think this has been a very good week for her. Two things happened. One, not in her control. One, completely in her control. One was that Madison Square Garden rally, which was a fiasco. I mean, just a disaster. All we talked about, or the thing that got the most attention, was the Puerto Rico joke, calling Puerto Rico an island of garbage. But it was the entire rally was like American carnage, right? It was one speaker after the other.
Yeah.
Misogyny, racism, bigotry, anti-immigrant sentiment. I mean, anti-everything, with like red lights and all of this screaming. It really was a hellscape.
Some of the other jokes and some of the other material was just actually so inappropriate that media hasn't covered it because they can't quote it.
Well, no, but you know
Yeah.
what happens, though?
Yeah.
What happens is the only reason I think that the Puerto Rican issue has gotten this much attention is because there happen to be Puerto Rican voters, a
In the
lot
swing
of
states.
them
Yeah.
in the swing states. In fact, yesterday the Miami Herald had an article or an editorial, which I thought was very insightful. Because when that Puerto Rico joke happened on Sunday, Marco Rubio and the congresswoman from Miami and the senator from Florida, the other one, Rick Scott, who's running, they all came out and condemned the joke about Puerto Rico. It's a terrible joke. It's horrible. It's an insult to Puerto Ricans. It's an insult to Latinos. We take great umbrage and offense. And the Miami Herald asked, where the hell were you guys when Donald Trump was saying the things he said about Haitians, of which there are hundreds of thousands also in Florida? The difference is there are no Haitian voters in any of the swing states.
Right.
And so the level of reaction and I think panic from the Trump campaign and the allies to this is because they understand what this means with a voting bloc that can make or break this presidential election, because they can make or break those swing states. And look, right when that happened on Sunday, that Madison Square Garden rally, all of these folks that I just talked to you about came out immediately.
They did.
4.5 hours before Trump came out, and then never said anything. Still to this day, he hasn't apologized.
Or even admitted hearing the joke at this point. Yeah.
He and J.D. Vance pretend that there was, that they didn't hear the joke. They were at the Madison Square Garden rally.
Right.
And maybe they didn't hear the joke, but I'm going to tell you this. They're going to hear every Puerto Rican and Latinos when they vote on Tuesday. And
yeah.
okay, so that was one thing. And the second thing was Kamala's rally.
Yes, I was going to ask you. You were there.
I was. I took a train. I had been here for CNN. I took a train that morning, and I didn't know if I was going to make it because there was an issue with the Acelas, the trains. They were all delayed. Some were canceled, but I made it. Rushed over there, dropped Chacha off at the hotel, and went off to the Ellipse, which has such a significance, right? The Ellipse is it's actually, a park in front of the White House. You can see the White House from the Ellipse, and it is the same exact place from where Donald Trump spoke on January 6th. And then all of those people he spoke to went off and charged the Capitol and did the things that they did. It was, it was emotional for me to be there. It was something I really, really wanted to go see because these things matter to me. The historical significance of it is really weighty to me. Some of the Capitol Police who we've gotten to know, Eugene Dunn is that his name? The big guy was there. The other one is a Sergeant Aquilino, I think his name was there. So some of those that we've gotten to know from TV were there. Also, very emotional moment, and she was spectacular. She spoke about unity. She spoke about giving every American representation and a seat at the table. She spoke about working across party lines. She spoke about having people around her that don't necessarily have to be yes people and that don't push back. I was, I was sitting next to her family, next to her sister Maya and her husband Doug and her brother-in-law Tony and Mina, her niece. And then there was this couple next to me, and I didn't know who they were. Right, I had not met them before.
This is not unusual for you to sit next to somebody and not know who they are, even if they're very famous.
Right, exactly. And but I they were sitting next to the family. I didn't know who they were, and I will ask a potted plant questions. So I was like, okay, so now I'm curious. Who are you guys? Well, it turns out one of the women, is Kamala's first cousin. And she's Mexican. So Kamala Harris has a Mexican first cousin. Kamala's uncle, so her mom's brother, came to study in the United States in the University of Wisconsin, met a Mexican woman, and they got married. They had this child who was born and raised in Mexico City.
Oh, wow.
So Kamala has a cousin named Sharada Orihuela who speaks perfect Spanish, knows how to cook tacos, and is Mexicanita. I was like, okay, how do I not know that Kamala Harris has a Mexican cousin, and why aren't you in Arizona?
Wow, that's interesting.
It was wonderful. Did you watch it on TV?
I did, and it got swallowed up here a little bit by some of the other controversial things happening this week. But it was, I think, probably her best speech. I think it felt really. You're right. It felt historic and important. Time will tell, but it felt very. And it
important. Was visually beautiful.
Yes,
you could
framed perfectly,
lit perfectly, framed perfectly, and I'll tell you, it felt. I mean, to me, it was such a stark contrast with what we saw at the Madison Square Garden rally. Because, Brian, it was the most beautiful, joyful, happy celebration of democracy. People were dancing. People were just overjoyed. You could, it was a contagious joy felt by 80,000 people. It kind of just carries you. And, after the rally, I went to dinner. By the way, we had to walk like camels. I mean, I had a pretty good seat, but I still had to walk like a farm animal to get there. But after the rally, my feet were hurting, everything. But I was so uplifted, and I was so energized. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go out there, and we're gonna do this. I went to dinner with a group. They call themselves the Colored Girls. And these are 5 Black women who started off in politics as very young women. Donna Brazile, Mignon Moore, Tina Flournoy, who was Kamala's first chief of staff. There's 5 of them who've grown up in politics together. And what this means to them was just to be able to share that moment with them was so big for me. It was so big for me. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, as our resident Floridian, because you're talking about the kind of aftershocks of that rally in Florida, and you're not someone who gets you're realistic about what's going on. Is there any chance, do you think, Florida flips?
Honestly, I don't think so. And the reason, and a few things, right? the Republicans really have a home field advantage there right now.
Right.
And it wasn't that long ago. When I came to Florida, Florida was all blue, was solid blue. And then for a while, we were a swing state. But Democrats have kind of capitulated on Florida, and they've given up, and so there's been very little investment. It's not one of the states that anybody sees flipping. I think that if the campaign had any notion that it could flip,
they'd be spending more time there. Yeah,
Kamala there, like she's been in North Carolina when they saw that there was a chance of flipping it. Look, I think a state like Florida requires an enormous amount of prolonged.
It's a big state.
Consistent investment, a stable of candidates that go growing up, that you go grooming into being able to run statewide, that first run local, then run state, then run for federal. So I think there's a lot to be work to be done by the Democratic Party in Florida, but I do think I do think this thing with the Latinos and the Puerto Ricans in particular is going to have it's a 5-alarm fire.
Right.
And I was flabbergasted when Trump did that press conference 2 days later at Mar-a-Lago and did not acknowledge it. I thought he was doing the press conference
to fix it,
right, to apologize, to acknowledge it, to condemn it. No. He went on and spoke about God knows what other stupid stuff. I was flabbergasted by it. And I will tell you, there is no way Puerto Ricans get over this. Yesterday, J-Lo was in Nevada with Kamala Harris. Last night at his concert in Texas, Mark Anthony also spoke out. I think we might see him on the trail in the next couple of days. And then the most coveted endorsement, Latin endorsement of any of them, Bad Bunny.
Bad Bunny,
happened
Former
that
View
Sunday.
guest, Bad Bunny.
I will tell you though, people think Bad Bunny endorsed or reposted her because of that comedian. It had been in the works for many, many weeks because Bad Bunny had been asking for specific Puerto Rico policy and working with the team. I'm really impressed with Bad Bunny.
Yeah.
So they have been working on Puerto Rico policy to help Puerto Rico, the electric grid, some of the other issues that are very specific to Puerto Rico. And Kamala Harris came out with that policy Sunday morning. The comedian did his thing Sunday night. And so, the contrast could not be more stark. On the one side, you've got a candidate, Kamala Harris, who's coming out with actual policy to help the people of Puerto Rico. On the other hand, you have got a whole group of folks being referred to as garbage by a comedian, and Donald Trump not even acknowledging it.
Well, speaking of interesting timing, the big news today is about our guest on Monday, Liz Cheney. And I'm sorry that this happened to her, but there were some really just inflammatory comments made by Trump about her, basically suggesting that because of her status as a war hawk, that she should know what it feels like to have 9 guns trained on her. Really just horrible. Do comments like this surprise you anymore?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's amazing to me that Trump keeps saying such stupid, horrible, hostile stuff. And
4 days before the election, even if taking away the content of it, just the strategic version of it, why are you saying stuff like this?
Because that's who he is. Because it reflects who he is, and because he can't help it. But I think it's reminded people. Do you remember when when this election started, people were writing about and talking about Trump amnesia and how America had forgotten who this guy was.
They took him off Twitter. They took him off places, and Yeah,
and he wasn't president. He didn't have the bully pulpit of the presidency for 4 years. Well, I think for those who may not have been paying attention for months, I think this last week has been a reminder of the chaos, of the hostility, of the division, of the anger, of the threats, of the ugliness, of all the things that people want to turn the page on. Right? And this thing with Liz Cheney is just another one of those things. It really hits me personally because I have seen. I mean, he's talking about her being, having 9 guns pointed at her face. I've seen the images of that happen in Cuba when Castro came in. I've seen what happened in Venezuela. I've seen what happens in Nicaragua, the country where I fled from. So these are things that I really don't take as hyperbole or, oh, don't take him seriously. No, you do take it seriously because democracy is frail. Now, Liz Cheney is is tough as they come. And I think there's this inner strength and peace. She and I talked about it before, that comes from knowing you're doing the right thing. And so I know her mettle, her conviction does not waver one bit because of the things he says and the threats. But it doesn't mean that it's not incredibly upsetting. It doesn't mean that it's not scary for her children. Mm-hmm. This is a woman who's got five children. And so I do think it's very serious. I was speaking to, one of the last times that I had a conversation with Kamala Harris. She asked me if I knew Liz Cheney and told me how impressive she found her. And I find that refreshing, that though they are two women from very different backgrounds and very different policy ideological thought processes, right? They disagree on policy. They have genuine disagreements on policy. They can see each other as humans and respect each other as humans. I think it's a great example for America.
I think so.
How are your girls? Because they're at an age where they're aware of this. How are they looking at these elections, and what are they saying? Well, I know one of them's not speaking to you right now.
One of them's not speaking to me because I didn't take her to the World Series. But the other one, they're not like entirely. They're not read up on policy. I mean, they're just not. They're aware of it.
Thank
it's
God.
a lot of conversation. Yeah.
They're 10 years old.
Right. There's a lot of conversation at school about it. And there's a lot of, they've asked me a couple of times because they hear, we don't talk politics at the table, but they hear my wife and I talking about it. They hear stuff about the show and things like that. So they'll ask questions. And I don't want them going to school and talking about it with their friends or getting into arguments or anything like that. But they're very excited about the idea that there's a woman that might be president next week.
So today we were talking about wives voting for Kamala and not telling their husbands.
Yeah.
Okay, as if that was a thing. To me, that's really hard to relate with because Al and I have voted differently at times.
I was going to say, I would assume you have, yeah, especially.
Well, yeah. In the Republican primaries, there was one in 2008. Al was the chair for Mitt Romney in Florida, and I was the chair for John McCain in Florida. So we went to battle. I took great advantage of him because he was too chivalrous to really come hard at me, and I swept the floor with him.
Yeah.
But what is it a thing for you? Would it bother you at all if Heather voted differently than you?
I don't think it would really. I think it would bother her if we weren't aligned. It's funny because when we first started dating, we were young, and I don't think politics was one of those things we really talked that much about how we felt. I think we probably had a general vibe for it of where we were on stuff, but we didn't have in-depth conversations about it. She said recently, when we've been out with other couples and things like that, well, thank God you and I are in sync because I don't think I could take it if we weren't. That's something that she feels. But
I think Trump has changed things,
I think so too.
It's a different level. Being out of sync is a different level. In 2016, Al voted for Trump.
Yeah.
And I voted for Hillary. And he told me he didn't think I should make it public.
Right.
With which, of course, I disagreed, and I did so. And
you made it very, very public.
Well, but it's also. Remember, I live in Miami,
right?
Where and I live in Miami, as a lifelong Republican, surrounded by Cuban Americans and a lot of conservatives, and so there was going to be repercussions, and there were friendships lost, and there were a lot of people who threatened me and called me all sorts of names. But again, there's this inner strength that comes from knowing you are doing the right thing. All
right. So yesterday, Joy asked me a question, speaking of how nice you're being to me, about who the crankiest co-host was. Because we were
Joy asked the question?
Joy asked the question. Because we were discussing...
That'd be like me asking, who's what co-host is an immigrant? I mean, what kind of leading question is that?
Well, so Joy's been moving around the days. We've been shuffling who's doing things on what day. And we found when we do her earlier in the week, she's crankier, but more entertaining. And we were debating, and she said, "Well, are the other ones cranky?
Well, I've listened to her on a Monday, and
Yeah.
she was uber cranky.
But
I've
really
listened to her
entertaining.
on a Tuesday. She was uber cranky.
Yeah,
Yesterday was what?
Thursday,
Okay, how'd she do?
a little better.
So what was it? Okay, so what's
So
the
so
question
basically,
and what's
she's
the
like,
answer?
"Are the other ones cranky when they're in there?" And I said, "Well, not really." But last week, Anna was a little riled up, and people noticed it. And then she wants to know what people think. Are people going to say that you're crankier on the podcast or Joy is? And I will say, a lot of people tell me the people that like Joy podcast like Anna podcast. There's definitely like those are my favorites. If you're into one, you're into the other.
They like the victimization of Brian.
I think that's part of it. I think, people have a vibe, and there are people that love like, a Sarah Haynes podcast, but it's a different, I feel like if you come out and say Anna Navarro is my favorite, you're probably going to like a Joy Behar podcast too. So the question is going out. Tuesday is election day. It's a big week. I'm going to have people vote on Tuesday. Who is crankier on the podcast?
You know what it is though?
Yes.
And I feel like Joy and I are completely authentic. We don't filter ourselves.
Correct.
We don't try to we don't care who likes us or who doesn't like us. It's just like, I'm too damn old to be pretending to be anything that I'm not.
Yeah.
So it's like, take me or leave me. You know, you don't
I
have
understand
to
that.
like
I
me.
respect it. In fact, I mean, with Joy podcasts, I have to work a lot harder. With you, I barely said anything today. This is great. I just say like, "Hey, Anna," and then you go.
What are you doing election night? How are you planning on watching?
I'm gonna watch. My wife gets very nervous about results and can't sit and watch it throughout the night, so she'll go in a different room. I'll watch. I'll have a computer and an iPad and my phone up, and I'll be looking at different websites and feeds and watching ABC and doing all that stuff. And then I'll have to run up totals to her throughout the night to reassure her or make her nervous. That's going to be my plan.
Well, like I told you before, I'm not obsessing about polls at all.
Right.
What does concern me, and I hear there's a lot from from people in my circle who are Trumpers, from people in my family who are Trumpers. Trump-aligned media 24/7 is driving home the message, the narrative that the only way Kamala can win is if fraud is committed.
Yeah.
That Trump has got this in the bag, that Trump is winning this handily, and the only way that Kamala can win is if there's cheating involved. That is a lie. That is absolute misinformation. As I sit here right now, I know that this race can go either way.
Correct.
I think Kamala is going to win, but I know Trump could win. And I think there's going to be very little anomalies in the voting, and so I think that's going to be one of the challenges, because those people are going to be convinced.
Well, and history has told us that no matter what, on election night, Trump's likely to declare victory for himself. I mean, before the votes are counted. I mean, that's what he did last time, and it seems likely he'll do it again. It's going to be a crazy week. Speaking of which, we have a really big week. So we have Monday, we have Liz Cheney. Tuesday's election day. Wednesday, all 6 hosts are going to be at the table. You'll be back here on a Wednesday, which is good. And I don't know if we'll have a president Wednesday morning that we'll know to talk about.
I think we're going to have a president Tuesday night. And I think that president is going to be Kamala Harris.
All right.
From my mouth to God's ear, I hope. And I think, I think she's done everything right. And I think all these people that come up to me, the closet Republicans, the closet Kamala voters who whisper to me, I'm not saying this out loud, but I just voted for Kamala. I really don't want people to know. I don't want to make a thing of it. But I just voted for Kamala. People tell me this. Even people in my own family tell me this. And so I'm very curious about 2 things. I want to see 2 numbers. One, I want to see what happens with the Latino vote. That people have been saying that Trump was going to get a historic number of a percentage of Latino support. I want to see what happens with that. I think he's going to get it in Miami from the Cuban Americans and the other.
He got that last time,
there.
Right?
Yeah, but I think it's going to be even higher more, than what he got 4 years ago. But I want to see what happens around the rest of the country, and I want to see the number of Republicans and right-leaning independents who vote for Kamala. I think that number could surprise us. I hope that it happily surprises us. She's certainly been working it, and welcoming them in a way that, frankly, Trump hasn't.
All right. Well, listen, it's going to be an exciting week. It's going to be a historic week, the most consequential election in our lifetime. And
if it doesn't go, the way I want it to go, or Joy wants it to go, then you're going to see cranky.
Then we're going to see cranky. It's going to be fine. No matter what, the union will survive.
No, right. I ain't leaving this country. That's all I can tell you.
None of you are. None of you are. But all right. Thank you for joining me today, Anna.
How was my cranky level today?
Oh, it was much better. I feel like this was average cranky for you, not excessively cranky. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, you hit it well. Thank you for joining me today. And then that's it for the week. We'll be back on Monday with Sunny Hostin right after our interview with Liz Cheney. It's going to be exciting.
Very good.
All right, see you all then.